Hi guys, today you will be taking your adding and subtracting fractions quiz. Before you do, let's walk through a review together. First, we'll review how to convert between mixed numbers and improper fractions. If we have an improper fraction and we want to convert it to a mixed number, we will divide the fraction and put the top dog in the house. Our numerator goes inside the house, and our denominator goes outside the house. Then we divide. How many times can 4 go into 10? 4 can go into 10 2 times. 4 times 2 is 8, and 10 minus 8 is 2. So now we can make our mixed number. Our answer is our whole number. Our remainder, 2, is our numerator, and our denominator, 4, stays the same. The last step would be to simplify. We can simplify both 2 and 4 by dividing by 2. So our mixed number would be 2 wholes and 1 half. If we want to convert a mixed number into an improper fraction, we can use the popcorn method, otherwise known as the Texas method. So to do this, we will multiply our denominator times our whole number. 4 times 2 is 8, and then we'll add our numerator. 8 plus 1 is 9. And then our denominator, 4, stays the same. For 5 2/3, we would multiply our denominator times our whole number. 3 times 5 is 15. And then add our numerator. 15 plus 2 is 17. Our denominator, 3, will remain the same. So our improper fraction for 2 1/4 is 9/4. And our improper fraction for 5 2/3 is 17/3. When adding and subtracting fractions, our first step would be to write our problem vertically so that we can easily see the steps we need to follow to solve. We will first find a common denominator with our fractions. Once we do and we convert our fractions to have that common denominator, we will solve. We will either add or subtract based on what the operation sign tells us to do, and then we will simplify our answer if we are able to. Let's review the steps for how to find a common denominator. We have two options. We can either find the least common multiple of both of our denominators, or we can just multiply both denominators together. Both will give us a common denominator. So to the right, we see 7/12 and 4/15. Both 12 and 15 are my denominators, and I need to find a common denominator. So we started listing the multiples of 12 and 15. So 12 times 1 is 12, times 2 is 24, times 3 is 36, times 4 is 48, times 5 is 60. Then we listed the first 5 multiples of 15. 15 times 1 is 15, times 2 is 30, times 3 is 45, times 4 is 60, times 5 is 75. We notice that 60 is a common multiple of both 12 and 15. So 60 could be our common denominator for both of these fractions. The other option would be to multiply both denominators together. So we could multiply 12 times 15. Okay, 5 times 2 is 10. 5 times 1 is 5, plus the 1 we carried is 6. I'm going to cross off the 5 and the 1 that I carried, and we can multiply by our second number. Add the placeholder of 0. 1 times 2 is 2, and 1 times 1 is 1. If I add both of these together, we get 180. So 180 would also be a common denominator of both 12 and 15. Next, let's review the steps for simplifying your answer. We have two options. We can divide by the greatest common factor of both numbers, or we can simplify by a small number that we know is a factor of both numbers, such as 2. If both of our numbers are even, we know that we could always divide by 2. And then we will continue to simplify that fraction until it is in simplest form. So we will solve using both methods for the fraction 12 over 20. So if I wanted to find the greatest common factor, we would list all of the factors of both 12 and 20. 1 times 12 equals 12. 2 times 6 equals 12. And 3 times 4 equals 12. And then we could list the factors of 20. 1 times 20 equals 20. 2 times 10 equals 20. And 4 times 5 equals 20. Next, I would want to find the greatest common factor between both numbers. I notice that 4 is the largest number that is a factor of both numbers. So we could divide 12 and 20 by 4, their greatest common factor, to get our answer in simplest form. 12 divided by 4 equals 3, and 20 divided by 4 equals 5. So our answer is 3/5. We could also simplify by a smaller number than 4 first. So if we have 12 over 20, I notice that both of these numbers are even numbers. So I could divide both of them by 2. And when I do, I get 6 over 10. Both 6 and 10 are even numbers as well, so we can divide them both by 2. 6 divided by 2 equals 3, and 10 divided by 2 equals 5. So again, we get an answer of 3/5. When you subtract fractions and you need to regroup, remember there are two methods that you can use to regroup. You can either use the borrowing method or the improper fractions method. So we will review both together with the same problem. First, we have the borrowing method. If I see my problem is written horizontally like it is here, the first step I will do is I will write it vertically. So 3 1/2 over 1 3/4. And we are subtracting these two fractions. So my first step would be to find a common denominator. I notice that 4 is a common denominator of both 2 and 4. I could multiply 2 times 2 to get to 4. I would also multiply my numerator by 2 to get my new fraction of 2/4. My other fraction already has a denominator of 4, so it can just remain the same, 3/4. Now I'm ready to subtract, but I can't subtract 3 from 2, so I would need to borrow from my whole number. So to do that, this 3 would become a 2. I'm taking away one whole. And then I'm adding a whole to the 2/4 that's already there. I want to write this as a fraction. And my denominator is 4, so my fraction that I'm adding is 4/4. When I add 2/4 plus 4/4, I get 6/4. So now we can subtract 3 from 6. So 6 minus 3 is 3 over my denominator of 4. And then we subtract our whole numbers. 2 minus 1 is 1. So our answer is 1 3/4. The other method we could use is the improper fractions method. In this method, we would need to convert both of our mixed numbers into improper fractions. So we'll multiply our denominator times our whole number and then add our numerator. So 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1 is 7. Seven halves. 4 times 1 is 4, plus 3 is 7. So 7/4. And we're going to subtract both of these fractions. Next, I need to find a common denominator for both fractions. I know that 2 and 4 both could have a common denominator of 4. So to get from 2 to 4, we multiply by 2. So I would also multiply my numerator by 2. 7 times 2 is 14. Because my other fraction already has a denominator of 4, it will just stay the same. So now we are ready to solve. My denominator will remain the same, and 14 minus 7 is 7. So now my answer is an improper fraction, and I need to convert it into a mixed number. So we'll put our top dog in the house. 4 can go into 7 one time. 4 times 1 is 4. And when we subtract, we get a remainder of 3. So our answer is 1 3/4. Notice how we got to the same answer both times. It just depends on which regrouping method works best for you. Now we'll solve a few adding fractions problems together. First, I will rewrite my problem vertically. 2/6 plus 5/9. I will find a common denominator for both 6 and 9, and I know that 18 is a common denominator of both numbers. Six times 3 is 18. 2 times 3 is 6. 9 times 2 is 18. 5 times 2 is 10. Now that I have common denominators and I've converted my fractions, I can add both fractions together. 6 plus 10 is 16, and my denominator 18 remains the same. And then I need to check and see if I can simplify my answer. I know that 16 and 18 are even numbers, so they can both be divided by 2. "16 divided by 2 is 8, and 18 divided by 2 is 9. 8/9 is in its simplest form, so that is my answer. Our second problem, again, I will write that vertically before we get started. 2 4/5 plus 3 1/2 A common denominator of both 5 and 2 would be 10. Five times 2 is 10. 4 times 2 is 8. 2 times 5 is 10. 1 times 5 is 5. Now we are ready to add our fractions, and then we will add our whole numbers. Our denominator is 10. 8 plus 5 is 13. Our whole numbers, 2 plus 3 is 5. I notice that my fraction is an improper fraction, so I will need to divide to make it a mixed number. I will put my top dog in the house. 10 can go into 13 one time, and we get a remainder of 3. So 1 3/10 is our mixed number. And then we need to add in that 5 wholes at the very end. So 5 plus 1 is 6. And then we keep the fraction 3/10. 6 3/10 is our answer. Last, we will solve a few subtraction problems together. The first problem is already written vertically for us. We need to come up with a common denominator, and I know that 40 is a common denominator of both 8 and 5. Eight times 5 is 40. 7 times 5 is 35. Five times 8 is 40. 3 times 8 is 24. Now we are ready to subtract. Our denominator is 40. 35 minus 24 is 11. And this fraction is in its simplest form, so 11/40 is our answer. Next, we see a subtraction problem, and it's written horizontally. So the first thing I'm going to do is rewrite it vertically. 3 3/4 minus 1 7/8. I need to find a common denominator. So the smallest common denominator that I could find would be 8. Since my fraction down below already has a denominator of 8, I don't have to convert this fraction. For the fraction up above, to get from 4 to 8, we multiplied by 2. 3 times 2 is 6. Now we're ready to subtract. I cannot subtract 7 from 6, so I would need to borrow from my whole number 3. The 3 will become a 2, and I'm borrowing 1 whole, and that will be in the form of 8 over 8. We will add 6 eighths plus 8 eighths, and we get 14 eighths. Now our number on top is larger than the number on bottom in our numerators, so we can subtract. 14 minus 7 is 7, and we'll keep the denominator of 8. Then we subtract our whole numbers. 2 minus 1 is 1. So our answer is 1 and 7 eighths. Now it's time to take your adding and subtracting fractions quiz. When you finish, remember to submit your work from your quiz to the assignment in Schoology. Then you can work on the step number 4 puzzle, the weekly choice board, or an iExcel or Dreambox. Have a great day. You guys are going to do awesome on your quiz today.